Hello, it's Cisvolk! Time to enjoy card making with me! In this video I will share some crafty ideas and ways to use these basic stamps designed by Carla Creaties. There is the splash, the thorn paper and the text balloons. I already showed them in my previous videos. There are 2 videos where I show you many techniques to use these basic solid stamps. Interesting for new and experienced card makers. In this video I will show new techniques. Now we head over to the text balloon stamps. They are open shapes that you can stamp and stamp all kinds of text in. I already tried it out and made some examples. I used different stamp sets for it. This is a sentiment from the Ocean 10 set. This is from the Guinea Pig 6 set. Happy Birthday is on the Birds 1 set, Hello World is from the Baby 2 stamp set, and An Awesome Day is on the Guinea Pig 7 stamp set. For some combinations it is useful to stamp the text first and the text balloon second, but for others they maybe fit both at the same time on a clear block. For this one, where the text is close to the line of the text balloon, I stamp the balloon first and the text next. So I recommend you to try it out first before stamping it onto an almost finished card. If you have a text that is shorter than the balloon, you can ink up half of it or how much ink you use and fill in the rest with a fine liner. I like to use this one for that. Then there is the torn paper stamp. I will demonstrate this one in a moment and show you examples. And there is the splash stamp. And this one is the one I will start with. For the first example I will use the outline of the splatter. That is this one. I will stamp it on watercolor card paper. I use CRaftemotions watercolor cardstock, the 200 grams. It is very smooth and very white. Take a large clear block or stamping platform and just stick the stamp to it. Take notice that there are no air bubbles in the middle of the stamp. The stamp will be higher on the point where there is an air bubble, and that can catch some ink when inking up the stamp, which will give ink blots on the wrong places on the paper, and we want to prevent that. You can add the little splatters and stamp them at the same time, but you can also choose to stamp them later to fill up the card panel. That can be a preference for when your clear block is too small, but also when you want to have more influence on how the splatter will look like on the card panel. Make the paper anti-static with some talcum powder or an embossing pouch when you are going to heat emboss the stamped outlines. I prefer to heat emboss because it makes it way easier to stay within the lines. And also it gives a glossy effect and a luxurious look to the card. I use VersaFine ink to ink up the stamp, and you see there is no ink at all in the middle of the stamp. If there is, you either push too hard on the ink pad or you have an air bubble in the middle. You can choose how to position the stamp. I haven't found a wrong way yet, but I find it nicest when the shorter splatters, these I have now at the top, are at the top or at the bottom. For heat embossing I use the Ranger clear embossing powder. You know how heat embossing is done, I assume, so I fast forward that and directly go to the coloring. Remember me to make a video another time about heat embossing. When you add clear embossing powder on black ink, the lines are better than if you would add black embossing powder. You can see and feel a tiny ridge of the stamp on the paper. Really nice. This shape you can now color. Depending on the paper you use, you can do watercoloring, like I will do now, but using other paper you can color with alcohol markers or any other markers, or with pencils, acrylic markers, paint or pastels or chalk, whatever you prefer. With distress ink in the colors Candied Apple, Fossilized Amber, Salty Ocean and Velena's Potion, and a wet brush, I will add color to the splash. Now this is watercolor cardstock, so the ink spreads easily. The colors you can blend into each other a little bit, and that is why you better check if the colors you will use go well together. If you work in rainbow order, you will always be on the safe side. So after adding the purple color next to the red, I go back to the red and blend it with the purple. And then I go on with the blue ink and the yellow ink. The blue and yellow will mix into a green color, and the yellow and red will mix into an orange color. The ink dries up fast, but when you add water and new ink, you can blend some more. And doing that with a water brush is easier because of the harsh bristles of the brush. I add a second layer to make the colors more saturated and vibrant, and that is how I prefer it. To the edges I add more saturated ink to give it a contrast. I don't do the whole edge, just half of each splatter. This way you get the feeling there is some dimension. If you don't have water-based inks, you can also use watercolor pencils or markers. Then you only color heavily handed at half of the splatters and color nothing at all in the middle. Using a water brush or a pencil, you can then smear the ink to the middle of the splash. Now I colored it in with happy colors and did not do my very best on the blending in the middle. The middle I will cover up with a nicely colored image anyway. I chose for this amazing butterfly and used the same colors to color it. Also on the envelope I stamped the splatter. On that one I only colored some edges to still have a blank space for the address. Now I have removed the tiny splatters, and here I have a plain white piece of paper. It is DCP printer paper. Let's stamp on it and stamp it with the same side up again. I now stamp every droplet separately on the place where I want it. Stamp most droplets in line with a drip. That way it will look more logically. Also stamp the bigger ones closer to the splash and the smaller ones further away. I got a bit carried away and stamped a lot of droplets, each one on a separate clear block. Set the ink aside for a moment to have it dry, or use a heat tool before you go ahead with this. Then we will cut out a gap in the splatter. Just poke a hole or make a cross with a knife to get an opening. I first make some cross cuts to create space to cut. Now we will cut a negative opening in the splatter. Hold your scissors at the bottom of the paper so you can see what you are doing. Choose whether you want to cut exactly on the lines or just a few millimeters next to it. Mostly when there is a lot going on the card, or if it has a lot of contrasting colors, I opt for a white border around my images. You can always cut it off later when it is not to your liking. You would have to cut again though. When cutting, hold your scissors still and move the paper. When coming to harder places, cut yourself away to give the scissors room to maneuver. Skip parts that are bothering you. Go on cutting and cut the harder parts later on. Go slow and preferably slower than you'd like. Cutting is practice, and a lot of practice. And use the scissors that work for you. For me that's always one of those little scissors. I try to cut the droplets with a wiggle blade. A friend gave it to me. It is a great tool if you practice it. Now I always have troubles cutting with a blade, but when I never try and practice, I will never get the skills. So I give it a go. Having all droplets cut out and intentionally left a white border, now look how awesome this looks when placed on top of a designer paper. Or on another pattern. How special this is. Even on such a paper it looks so funny. This is the Arctic Winter pattern paper set. Double-sided paper with a push-out sheet. I put the seal in the splatter opening. Because I glued the panel raised with foam, I could easily slide the seal in between. The white panel I glued on a larger piece of patterned paper, on which I colored the edge black to have it stand out. The same I did for another piece of pattern paper and in between a piece of white cardstock. Don't worry, I only used a small border of the red mittens paper. There's no way I will waste any piece of this gorgeous paper. If you look closely, you see white splatters on the panel that I made with some Nouveau embellishment mousse. There's a speech bubble added with chill out in it from the Arctic winter stamps. On the bottom of the envelope I glued 2 leftover pieces of the designer paper. And on the edge of the envelope I stamped the splatter again and I colored the edges with a very light amount of ink. If you don't like to color or want to do something else, you can stamp on patterned paper. Here I have the Arctic winter pattern paper. It is very nice and funny paper. There are a few other designers' papers designed by Carla Creaties. Maybe you know the Hedgie paper set. The paper is double-sided and I want to stamp the splatter on a nice piece. They are all possible, so now I have a hard time choosing. I stamp with minimal waste of the paper. The droplets can go close to each other. No one will know they belong further apart. This one must dry before we can go further with it. Let's cut out the paper we need. I separated some of the droplets because watch what we can do to pimp it up. With the color Salty Ocean Distress Oxide and the blending foam, we can touch up the edges. Only apply a little ink. Distress Oxide is an opaque ink. It will cover the image underneath if you apply too much. Make rotating movements. The middle must stay clean and the edges will color blue. In here there are some droplets that I color all at the same time. You can choose to leave the droplets white or also color them blue. So I will color them all. And I can tell you that it is way easier if you blend them before you cut them out. I cut out a few of the droplets and you see the difference. Some are still light and white. They pop up more, but the ones I colored fit better to the splash. I prefer the blue blended ones. A fun thing about having them cut out now is that you can play with the water droplets and choose where you want them. If you stamp the drops, they are stuck and cannot move anymore. While now you can make the best composition. Take pictures in between of different compositions and save them for next use so you know where to stamp if you stamp directly onto a card. Using a white Posca marker or a white gel pen, you can now add highlights on the dark edges of the splatter and the water drops. It is so easy to do and it really makes it pop. So there you see the difference between layering a white panel on top or cutting into the pattern paper. Also, you can add ink blending on the layer under the white panel if you like. The cutout pieces that come with the designer paper in the Arctic winter set are quick and make the perfect cards for winter or Christmas or a swimming exam, for example. With stamped images, the effect will be the same. You might have to cut parts off to have them fit into the splatter. Here you see the finished card. I stamped the splash on pattern paper, cut that out and blended the edges. Darker outside and lighter at the inside. I traced the outlines with a black marker to get a nice cut line. After gluing, I add white splatters with Nouveau embellishment mousse. The text balloon I turned a quarter and was the perfect fit for this text. The small fishes are stamped and colored with alcohol markers. Here on the envelope I also used such a funny fish. The edges of the splatter are cut off. A perfect match this way. And so funny, you can add any critter in such a splatter on pattern paper and use your own stamped and colored images. Or push out figures, so it looks like it comes out of that splatter or is just swimming in it. Then we will now use watercolor cardstock, which is aquarelle paper, and use the solid splash stamp on it. Now I added the droplets directly on the clear block. We take 3 colors of Distress Oxide ink and we will add all 3 colors to the stamp. Look carefully not to ink up the colors directly on top of each other and try not to overlap them, because you want to keep the ink pads clean. We use the colors Tea Dye, Festive Berries and Vintage Photo. They are colors that lay close together in a color wheel. Do you want to have the colors closer together or spread them evenly, you can use a sponge dauber or blending tool to add some of the darkest color on top of a lighter color. And you can do this with any color, of course. Next, you spray a little bit of water on the stamp. We take our piece of watercolor card and you see the water reacts with the ink. Maybe I added a bit too much water. And then you stamp the stamp onto the paper. Press it well and lift the stamp. Where there is too much ink, you can lift it with a tissue and leave it to dry. I cleaned the stamp and positioned the splatters on my paper instead of on the clear block. This way you can see what composition you want. In my case, I like it this way because on the top I want the figure to rise up above. If you need more water drops, you can clean them and add them afterwards. Now we can pick up the stamp and ink the stamp, this time with some blue tone colors. I've used Chipped Sapphire, Salty Ocean and Salvage Patina. Stamp again on watercolor cardstock and you see immediately that the ink is sinking onto the paper and spreading. The more water you spray, the more blotchy the print will become. When you want to stamp the silhouette on top of this solid shape, there can be a problem if you can't find the right size water droplet to fit the solid ones you already stamped. I have an easy solution for that. You can use the back of the acetate sheet where the stamps are kept on. Hover it on top of the drops and see which one fits. Pick up a stamp and stick it to a clear block. We now look through the acetate sheet and see which one matches best. Sometimes it's hard to see. It is this one or the other. No, it's this one. I'm a bit upset, but I don't worry about that. It is watercolor, and with watercolor you like it to have some white edges. If you want it perfectly aligned, there are ways to achieve that. In the previous video about the basic shapes, I showed you tricks to find the perfect spot to stamp. You need a stamping platform for it though. In these colored splatters we can put all different images. For example, this funny ice cream from the Summer Fun collection. Look how awesome it looks! Or maybe a freak shake. This one is from the other Summer Fun stamp. I might turn the paper and have the freak shake stand out of the splatter. And how about if we cut off the top, so like this? It's like a cup of cocoa. Nice! Although I think I would put it the other way around then. From the funny animals we can add a pig in this splatter as well. Look how funny! It is just like a mud puddle. Then you could cut off the neck or make a cut and slide it in the panel. The turtle can do as well. If the turtle would hang along the edge of the paper, it would be really nice. Using this stamp set you could make a fun card. Carla also used this one. If you cut it and add it to the splash, it is totally cute. Let's turn the paper. You could also cut off less of its tail to have it jump higher. This seal can also jump so lovely out of the splatter. Or this cutie. Now I want to turn it again. It depends on the splatter or the way you want the movement. This bottom is too much. What you can do to add to this stamp is cut a line in this pattern, just in the blue part. You can use a blade for that. And then you can slide the cutout figure and glue it to the card. Well, ideas aplenty. Here you see one of the splatters finished to a funny birthday card. I cut off the head of the pig, glued the neck flat onto the splatter and glued the head back unraised with foam squares, but a bit shifted. For the background I used the balloon stencil and stamped the word oink everywhere. Now I would like to show you the torn paper. The stamp with the gap and the stamp with the rip. And I have some tips for you that you don't want to miss out on. I stamped the stamps on white paper and cut them out to show you the different possibilities. This figure you can use both ways. I stamped both of these on 2 pieces of paper. On the right one I cut out the top part and on the left one I cut out the bottom part. For this gap stamp I cut out the middle part. I will place a black piece of paper in the background so it is easier to see. And you can do that yourself as well. You can put a piece of pattern paper underneath or a piece of colored paper or a paper you colored yourself with stamps or inks or markers or whatever. To make the effect even better, you can stamp the torn paper a second time and cut out the part that is white on your card. That piece you layer on top of the stamped part of the card. And this way it looks like the paper is turning over. You can layer it flat or with foam, whichever you prefer. You can even add more layers for the ultimate professional look. So for every stamp, I stamped it again and cut out the part that needs to be in the front. This cute seal you can stick below the paper and now it looks like it is looking out of a hole of the eyes. Or when you stick it over here, it looks like it's sitting in a wave on the ocean. See how awesome this is? It gives extra depth to the card. And don't glue the pieces to the card immediately, wait for the composition to be complete before you add tape or glue. If you use a turtle or another critter with loose paws, you can place the head in and behind the gap and place its paws on top of the flipped paper. Same for the cat. Stick the neck of the cat behind and place the paws half on top. You can play with these paws. Look how awesome this looks. The dog could also fit in. But with this stamp, and maybe also for others, there's depth in the image itself. Let me show in this torn paper example. If you put the dog in the opening, its nose will be behind the paper and that is no fun. To solve this, I cut on the line between the paw and the cheek of the stamp. Can you see I made a small cut? Well, now you can use it to tuck the dog in and stick the paws behind. Now the dog looks over the edge. You can also do the same for the same torn paper, but upside down. Then it looks different. The paper is behind the dog. This easel fits in anything, looking up or down or on its side. It is crazy how funny it is. You can also turn the torn paper stamps, and still then the easel fits in perfectly. I suggest you make these samples for yourself and see what images you have to combine to see what great combinations you can make. And look at this funny giraffe. This is so much fun. Also the fish is nice. It fits in the bigger hole best. It looks like it just swam out of a cave. We can even use this sawfish, just like it saw the opening and reveals something that is underneath. Maybe we might have to change the size of the card. Having these samples helps to find the best position and the size of the card. Text can also be placed in the gap from the torn paper stamps. Even in this one. The sawfish reveals that it is Christmas. I cannot stop doing this. It is so much fun. Ideas are endless with it. I'm sure of it, you have stamps in your stash that you can use to combine with these torn paper stamps. And in combination with these text balloons, a card is not hard to make at all. Stay cool and find your happy place. What I also like so much about the cat is to have it peek around the corner and have one of the paws in front of his eye. Just like he is saying, I did not do this. There were too many ideas and too few time to make cards for it, so for now I only created the sawfish. The text is stamped on the base card. On top of that you see a blue blended panel on which I stamped the torn paper and cut the piece out there where the text is underneath. Then I stamped the torn paper again on a pink piece of designer paper and cut that out to glue on the card as a flap of the torn paper. Now I will demonstrate how you can stamp an image in 2D without cutting into the paper and show you how you can make Carla's koala example. For this, Carla used this koala stamp, but it is of course sitting on a branch with its paws around it and you don't see it on the example. We don't want this on our stamp this time. When we are masking, we always start with that part that is most in the front. In this example, the head of the koala is most in the front. Therefore, we want to stamp the koala first. But we don't want the whole koala, just its head. For that, we are going to make it possible to only ink its head. I use purple sticky tape, but you can also use masking tape or washi tape. With that, I will cover the parts that I don't want to see on the stamped image. Let's keep the fingers, but mask off the feet and butt and the branch. Attach the tape firmly. We stamp the ink on top of the purple tape. This image I will stamp in Memento ink, because I will be coloring with alcohol markers. Now we can remove that purple tape. And now we can stamp the koala on the paper. This ink dries fast and there is no smudging with this ink and alcohol markers. Now I want to protect the koala in a way that I don't ruin it and stamp on top of its eyes when adding the torn paper stamp. For that we need to make a mask. I used stamped masking tape from CRAFTEMOTIONS for it. It is a roll of fully covered stickiness, just like post-it tape, but with stickiness over the whole length. To make this mask we ink up the koala, but don't bother about the butt and feet this time, and stamp the koala on the masking tape. It also don't need to be a perfect stamp impression. Now cut out the koala. You only need to cut out the part that we stamped on the card already. Best use fast drying ink for making masks, otherwise you get inky fingers and you can make smudges on your paper. My ink on the mask is still a bit wet. I must be careful. Be sure to check if your stamped image is dry before sticking the mask on top of the card. Now let's ink up the torn paper stamp. On the example, the curl of the torn paper points upward. You don't see the edge of the lower torn paper, so that part needs to be covered by the head. Now it is a matter of aim and stamp. You see that by using this yellow masking tape, you protect the koala from new stamp marks. And there it is, as we want it to be. So we now can color the hole black. Or we can cut out the hole with scissors or a blade. But we can also stick stamped and cut out pattern paper on it. See how cool it already looks when you color the hole with a black marker? I made a clear and simple card with it. You see that also simple cards are awesome and don't need much more when you have the right composition and stamps. A pink piece of designer paper I used to stamp on, cut out and glued on top of the upper torn paper. The Hello World and Baby Girl text stamped next to it, and on the envelope I used the other torn paper stamp, colored the gap black and added stamped and cut out pieces of designer's paper on the paper curls. A fun idea for a baby card! Well, when working with this stamp I noticed something curious. It is designed as torn paper, but it actually also looks like a leaf of some kind. A dandelion leaf perhaps. So then I came up with another totally different idea. Stamp it like this and you have a background with leaves. And I don't know if you recognize this stamp. Carla designed this one as well. It is on this stamp set, the Box 2 set. It is an older one and one of the first stamps from Carla I own. You can add more leaves, so to say, and make it into a condolence card. Or place it this way. It is just an idea. And if you want to make it fun, you can also add lovely colored critters to the scene. Yeah, I love it. Or leave the dandelion out and add another flower. A bit too blue, but okay, better color than no color. Oh, this is so cute. I can play with this all day and make my own story. How about you? How about a pumpkin and a cute hedgehog and butterfly for a fall card? The card I finally made has a background made with splatters and smudges of Distress Oxide ink. I added the dandelion and the cute ladybug. On the envelope I used the masking technique to merge all layers of stamps together and also colored that with Distress Oxide ink and a little Nouveau shimmer spray for the shimmer on the green. All techniques I showed you in this video you can use with all other basic stamps. In this video we saw how to use the text balloons. We also saw how to stamp the splash stamp and color it in happy colors. If you heat emboss the edge stamp first, then you will color easily within the lines. We saw how to stamp on designer's paper, blend the edges and cut it out. We learned to stamp the splash on white paper and cut out the negative. This white paper you can layer on top of some designer's paper. We saw that you can also use Distress Oxide ink on the solid stamp. Spray it wet with some water and stamp the splatter. And when dry, add the outline. We watched how to make torn paper. Cut out the hole and add an extra stamp that was cut to create dimension. We learned how to mask the stamps and how to magically bring out a funny koala without overlap. And as a bonus, we saw that you can not only use the torn paper as just torn paper, but as gorgeous leaves as well. I used a massive amount of stamp sets that I have collected in the past few years. There are so many beautiful designs and they all have gorgeous fonts and funny text with them. The basic collection is perfect for combining the stamps you already have and enjoy so much and try out new techniques. Oh, the prize is still there. That's an old one. And then there is a gorgeous fish that I used in the previous video. Oh, and there's also that gorgeous patterned paper from the Arctic Winter collection by Carla Creaties. I hope you liked this video and will click the thumbs up button. I hope you appreciated my tips and tricks and came up with new ideas to use your stamps. You can share the video with friends. And you can save the video in your personal playlist to watch it again another time when you lack some inspiration. You can find my cards on Instagram, Facebook and on Pinterest. The original cards are displayed at fairs in the CRAFTEMOtions booth. I would love it if you write a message to me in the comments to tell me what you liked about the video or what you would like to see next time. If you have any questions, please ask me. I am willing to help. Thank you so much for watching and I will see you next time. Bye bye!